Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be discussing cheat detection and basically why I think FIDE needs to kind of update its cheat detection methods. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button, click on your notification icon. So the current cheat detection that FIDE uses is a cheat detection that was invented kind of by this guy named Ken Regan, who's a mathematician, kind of statistician kind of guy, who does cheat detection. He's also an international master, so he knows quite a bit about chess as well. The guy is a pioneer in the field, and the guy is an absolute expert when it comes to cheat detection. And I'm just going to give you like a little overview of kind of how he does his cheat detection. It's actually kind of sophisticated, and it's kind of cool. And then I'm going to try to explain why I think that we really do need to update the methods that we're using to detect cheating currently. So the way Ken Regan's cheat detection works is it takes a look not just at whether or not your moves correlate with an engine, because a lot of people think that's all cheat detection is if a move correlates one-to-one with an engine. It's not exactly what it is. It also takes a look at how complex the position is. So basically in a position that's really simple, like let's take the two-move checkmate for example. Let's say white plays f3, e5, g4, queen h4, mate. We would see in a human game, like if a strong human player were playing the black pieces and a weak human player obviously was playing the white pieces, we would see a 100% engine correlation in this situation. So like that's one of the reasons why when you see these things where you say, oh, well, we did the chess-based check engine game on Hans Niemann and he matched 100% with engine picks for some of his games, that's not actually in and of itself evidence of cheating. If the positions were relatively simple and if you have non-complex positions and the games are relatively short, you can get 100% correlation games. And of course, when they did these things, they would actually compare him to the average, grandmaster result, which is, in the 70s and 80s. And they would say, oh, well, look, here's evidence that he's cheating, because he had this occasional 100% game, or he had more 100% games than Magnus Carlsen, without taking into account the relative complexity of the positions, or his opponents, which can sometimes lead to positions that are much simpler. So, like, if you're a 700 player and you're playing against a 2200 player, we would expect that if you had some very good preparation, the positions might get very simple very fast and you might win the game very early. This could very easily lead to 100% correlation, sort of like in the two-move checkmate. So in the two-move checkmate, we have a very poor play from white and we have a very simple position for black. So we would expect 100% correlation. So here, there's one check in the position that's about as simple as it gets. So what is complexity? How do we define it? And we need to define this in some way that's mathematical and statistical. So without going into too many details, for the most part, the complexity of a position is just kind of defined by how many checks, captures, and threats exist within the position. That's one of the easiest ways to define it. Now, I don't know all the exact ways that these top statisticians define it. They might have other criteria that they use to determine positional complexity, but I'm just giving you kind of the simplest breakdown on how you could determine how complex a position is. So like another example of a position that wouldn't necessarily be pegged as cheating would be like from, say, we take this excerpt from Edward Lasker from Thomas, starting at this move. This is starting at move 10. Now, what you're going to notice in this game, like, if I turn on like a default kibitzer here, the default kibitzer, Stockfish, is going to immediately spit out queen takes h7, and it's going to be like, well, that's mate in 9. And interestingly enough, you're going to see in this game between Edward Lasker and Sir Thomas, from this move on, from move 10 all the way to the end of the game, which happened on move 18, and now, of course, Stockfish is spitting out, mate in 7, you're going to see 100% correlation. Now, even, for a strong grandmaster, this position is still relatively simple. Each position in the sequence of moves only has about 2 or 3 checks within each position leading to the mate. So it's actually not inconceivable that this is beyond the abilities of a human player to find. So like queen takes h7, king h7, knight f6, king here, and now he plays the correct knight check, knight on e to g4. The reason I have this highlighted is because it's not only the correct knight check, it happens to be the knight check that simultaneously reduces the complexity of the position. Because if you play knight on f to g4, there's more squares that the king can move to, and knight on e to g4, there's fewer squares that the knight can move to. This means that this is naturally going to be the move that the human player is going to find. He's going to find this knight on e to g4 before he finds knight f g4, meaning that finding knight on e to g4 should not count against a human when you're looking at these games statistically as, look, he picked the top pick, therefore he's cheating. Or therefore, that's a point towards believing that he's cheating. So it's not just taking a look at engine correlation, it's taking a look specifically at engine correlation within positions that are complex, where we would not expect human beings to correlate with the engines. So another thing that they're taking a look at with all this stuff, and another kind of brilliant thing that Ken Regan is taking a look at. So none of this would be considered insane for white to find any of these moves. Another thing that they're taking a look at is evaluation change. Like, if they do pick the second or third pick, like in this case, if we go to this move here after king f3, the best move is going to be either king f1 or castles kingside, which mates in 2. But the second best move is the move that got played, or the third best move, however you want to look at it, is the move bishop e2 check. Now, they're not going to count this against cheating. Like a lot of people say, oh, well, we can avoid cheat detection by simply picking the third pick. Or that's how Niemann is avoiding cheat detection, is by simply picking the third move in the bucket. They take that into consideration too. What they're looking for is a significant evaluation change. So there is no significant evaluation change between bishop e2 check, which leads to mate in 3, and castles kingside or king f1 that lead to mate in 2. And actually all of these moves within this 6-move bucket here would be considered roughly equivalent in terms of if we're evaluating this for cheat detection. We would consider all of this in correlation with the engine. We wouldn't say, oh, they picked the mate in 4, and that's the 6th computer pick, therefore they're not cheating. No, all of these moves would be considered engine correlation moves. But again, interestingly enough, in this position, the position would be considered simple enough that we would not count this as a position that we would count against somebody if they did find any of these moves that led to mate, because we actually consider this position relatively simple, where we would actually expect a strong player or a strong grandmaster to correlate with the engine very highly in a position that's simple. So what about complex positions? Well, I'm taking this excerpt from a Mikhail Tal game. This was played between Tal and Olofsson in Zagreb in 1959. And I'm actually going to reduce the numbers of CPUs here just so I don't get any freezing issues, but we're basically just looking for close correlation, so we don't need to be running these engines full bore anyway. So if we take a look at this game, we have a Sicilian defense, and the Sicilian defense is something like, especially the open Sicilian, is something that's very well known to get very complex very quickly. So we'll have this kind of complex situation occur fairly quickly. Right now the position's still relatively simple, and we're still seeing a high correlation of top picks to engine moves from both players. So bishop f2, we're going to have queen c7, we're going to have queen f3. Notice that we're still correlating relatively heavily. Bishop e7 was definitely in that top 3 bucket. Again, they're looking more at just, are they corresponding with the bucket of, like, say, the top 1, 2, and 3 moves, as opposed to just, are they picking the top move every single time? But we have castles queenside, which did correspond with the top move. We have bishop d7. We have g4. And now the position is starting to get a little bit more complex. We're starting to have more captures, more threats, and more things like that present. Knight d4 is now a possibility. G5 is a possibility. Rook c8 is a possibility. So we're still staying within the bucket, with this move g5. But the bucket is starting to get larger in terms of the number of moves that lead to interesting evaluations. So here we have more complexity, but still Tal is finding the best moves. He's finding knight c6, bishop c6, and now finally we see this move that Tal plays. We see this move he plays, f takes g5, which if you let the engine run long enough, f takes g5 is going to start falling way outside of the bucket. If you let this move, if you let the engine ruminate a little bit, FG5 starts falling outside of the bucket. Now, interestingly enough, depending on what engine they're using, the depth settings that they're using, etc., FG5 could be in the bucket, or FG5 could be out of the bucket. But in general, the more complexity that you start seeing in a position, the less correlation you're going to see. So here we have a lot of options for check captures and threats. We have bishop d4, we have f5, we have pawn to h4, and of course we have the move that got played. We have f takes g5. So you're going to start seeing more disagreement as the position becomes more complex. You're going to see more and more engine disagreement. People playing moves that fall completely outside of the bucket, or people that are playing moves that are falling on the lower end of the bucket. So we're going to have FG5, we're going to have HG5, and now the position has once again become simple. There's not that many threats in the position, not that many checks, not that many captures. So we're going to start seeing that engine correlation again. We see that top pick from the human, probably also a top pick from the engine. So now we have rook h6. Again, we're kind of, sticking with the engine correlation. We're going to have h4, we're going to have knight d7, and then we're going to have something that would count against Tau. Like if we were checking this game today for engine correlation, we're going to see an evaluation change. We're going to see this pawn move to h5, and that's a significant evaluation change. What they're looking for with significant evaluation changes is the position going from, say, slight edge white to equal, or major advantage white to only slight edge white, or equality, basically changing the possible result of the game. So an evaluation change means it's not going from +3 to +2, where one side is clearly still better and probably still winning. It's changing from slight edge to equality, from equality to slight disadvantage. Those are the evaluation changes they're looking for, because those are the evaluation changes that can potentially change the result of a game. So the move h5 would be a heavy indicator that Tau was not cheating when he played this game. Another heavy indicator is that this game was played in 1959, and obviously they didn't have computer engines back then that were smart enough to beat even a toddler that just kind of knew how to move the pieces. So that's probably another indicator. So more than one indicator that Tau wasn't cheating. But if we were to look at this game today, how would we assess it? And that's one of the things we need to start looking at, is because there's plenty of players that had 100% engine correlation moves that played back then. If you look at Capablanca's games, a lot of his games correlated with the engine 100%, especially when he was playing against really weak competitions. And one of the advantages Capablanca had in achieving that was that his positions were relatively simple. So it was easy for him to find these things. Now, another thing that you need to take a look at is when they completely miss the bucket completely, like when they throw an air ball. Now, as far as I know, this is one of the ways that Ken Regan's method kind of falls short. So an example right here would be later on in this game. If we just kind of fast forward in this game after h5, we'll just play a few more moves just so you can see the game, just if you're curious. Here we have queen b3, king f7, and we have all of this stuff, and we're getting actually pretty close to engine agreement here. But then we have this move knight c3. Now what's interesting is this move is a complete whiff. Like if you look at the engine assessment right here, it's really high. This is clearly like a +2, +3 position for white. Tau's doing amazing here. He's got a huge advantage. And we're seeing the main bucket of moves here. We're seeing knight b4, bishop e5, rook d2. But then, there's even a secondary kind of bucket of moves where white still has some sort of advantage. Knight c1, rook d1, rook f2, bishop c3, etc., going all the way down. So here's one of the things that they've noticed with cheaters, is if you're cheating, and you're doing intelligent cheating, a lot of times you will not necessarily pick the top move, or even the move that's in one of the top 3 buckets. A lot of times you'll pick one of the moves down here, like 7, 8, and 9. But one of the things you need to look for is how often, not just how often people get the best move, but how often people will just completely whiff and just play a move that just completely blunders and is not even in the bucket remotely. And as far as I know, Ken Regan's method doesn't really take that into consideration. What they're looking at is just percentage of engine agreement, an engine agreement within kind of the complexity of the position and within that top 3 bucket. But if that's true, the reverse of that is also true. You should see the reverse end of that. And this is something that a lot of online platforms to detect cheating do use. They use this reverse approach. They're using the reverse approach where they're taking a look at how many times do people completely whiff. Because people should whiff on a pretty regular basis. Even guys like Mikhail Tau, knight c3 is a complete whiff. We see a major evaluation change. The evaluation goes way down, and it completely whiffs the top 3 buckets. It whiffs on the top 9 buckets. It's way down the list. It's basically just a bad move in a complex position, but it's a bad move. So we're going to expect human beings not to agree with the engine in complex positions, which this is, but we're also going to expect, in some cases, just complete whiffs where they just don't agree with even like the top 5 or top 6 moves within that bucket. And that really helps with more sophisticated cheat detection. But that's, of course, not the only thing that helps with more sophisticated cheat detection. Another thing that Ken Regan's system doesn't take into consideration is it doesn't take into consideration move times. And this is something that, at least online, they've been doing for a very long time. Even going back to just like, some of the first online chess where they were actually doing some cheat detection, one of the methods that was explained to me one time to detect cheating was they would just take a look at move times, and if the move times were really, really flat, like if somebody moved at 3 seconds a move, every single time, this was an indicator that they were using a bot. Because only a bot can move at exactly 3 seconds a move every single time. So for the most part, my understanding is with move times, they use the move times more as kind of a bot detection method. But of course, it's a data point. And if you incorporate move times into your cheat detection becomes more accurate. So what FIDE really needs to do, and I'm not familiar with all the algorithms or all the details, like again, this video is basically just giving you a general overview of how this works, and I'm dumbing it down. But it's a more accurate overview than the last overview I did of this, where I dumbed it down even more, and I was trying to leave out a lot of information because I didn't want people to understand the exact details of how cheat detection worked. Here I'm giving a lot more details because a lot of this stuff has already been made public, so I don't feel like I'm actually revealing any information. And I'll also point out that I don't have any direct inside information about any of this stuff anyway. All of my information that I'm getting for this video is secondhand or third-hand information that I'm getting from various computer experts, people that have worked with cheat detection in the past, but I wouldn't exactly call cheat detection experts like Ken Regan. I've never spoken with Ken Regan personally. A lot of the analysis that I'm giving of how this works is based off of things that Ken Regan himself has said in interviews about how his cheat detection works, and also things that I've talked to with other people that have done forms of cheat detection for various websites a long time ago. And yeah, so second and third hand information on how this is done. But what we need in FIDE is a system that incorporates the best knowledge that we have about cheat detection, because this is really how we should be doing anything in chess, is we should be using the best information that we have. So we need a system that incorporates the type of cheat detection that chess.com uses. I think that FIDE and Ken Regan should get together with chess.com. Chess.com has spent like millions of dollars on their cheat detection. It's the most sophisticated cheat detection in the world. They need to get together and they need to incorporate chess.com's cheat detection into their cheat detection. And they also need to incorporate more elements and more data points into their cheat detection. They need to incorporate things like move times, checking for flat move times, checking for odd move times, etc. Now, of course, there's this kind of catch-22. You want the cheat detection to be sophisticated enough to actually catch cheaters, but you don't want the cheat detection to be so broad that you're detecting ghosts, that you're detecting things that aren't there. But I believe that that balance does exist. I believe that chess.com and other sites are doing a very good job with this type of cheat detection, and they're doing it in a way that's ethical and is not catching people that are not cheating. They're only catching people that are really cheating. So I think we can update this cheat detection and we can make it more reasonable and we can make it more up to date for the modern era. The cheat detection that we're using is probably about 20 years out of date. It really is. Or 15 or 20 years out of date. This is the same cheat detection we were using back in 2006, 2007. They're using essentially the same type of stuff. Maybe there's been little tweaks to the algorithms here and there, but essentially they're using the same type of cheat detection. I think it's time that FIDE updates this, that they incorporate the information that we've learned from places like chess.com and from online cheating and the type of algorithms that they use for online cheating need to be incorporated into over-the-board cheating. And we just need more thorough, accurate statistical cheat detection in the real world. No matter what else happens, I think we should get that out of this controversy. Well, anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and thank you very much for watching.